Hey, I have been so excited to bring this first official interview to you. And if I'm honest, when I started my podcast almost a year ago, when I thought of the idea of doing interviews, I thought, well, of course I'd have Erin on. So that day is today, 10 months later into this podcast. And as we do that, I'd love to just paint a little bit of a picture as to what you're going to hear today. And we promise we're going to keep this professional and not get into chatty friend mode since we've been working together for so long. So I met Erin 12, 13 years ago when I actually left my corporate career and joined a nonprofit that many of you have heard me talk about. And it was, and gosh, looking back, I am so glad Erin was at my side. It was a wild ride. A friend introduced him to Erin, and she came in and cleaned up shop. We were going through a huge brand transition and messaging transition. And long story short, that organization's revenue tripled in 18 months. And so I quickly saw the power of a lot of the things Erin was doing. And, it was lots of things that led to that growth. But Erin was a huge part of that. And so when I went out on my own about 3 years later, so quickly I was meeting clients and talking to people, and I was like, they need Erin. They need Erin, just like I needed Erin. And so I'm really excited to talk to her today and have her just ooze her knowledge to you, if that's a phrase. And so when I describe Erin, I always say, okay, I'm going to introduce you to Erin. She's the nicest person I know first. But what I'm really meaning to say, and I usually say also, is Erin is this amazing, magical skill set of course she's a writer. She fixes a lot of my miss apostrophes and miss M dashes that when I write, often, but she is a strategist. She understands fundraising. She understands donor segmentation. She has her MBA. So she's a businesswoman. All of that laying on top of each other, I really feel is this very unique skill set that frankly gets a lot of my clients' results. And so Erin is just this asset, not only to me, for the emergency call of does this look right? But gosh, she's such an asset to so many of my clients. I always tell people I've never had a client say, didn't love working with Erin. They always love working with Erin. They always love, frankly, just the expertise that she brings to the table. So, good morning, Erin.
Well, good morning. I didn't realize I get to come on here and feel so great about myself and working with you. This is so nice. Thank you for the great intro.
Yeah, well, you should feel like that because I really, what an easy intro for me to write. So gosh, I think maybe I'll start right there and I'll ask you maybe it's do you see this, just how all of this has come together? And I'd love to just kind of hear how your take on how all of your skills and background and amazing jobs and teaching, I didn't even mention that, have really led you to being this amazing strategist and content creator for nonprofits.
Well, I definitely didn't start my career thinking, I'm going to be in the nonprofit realm. I went to Illinois State University and studied marketing communications and business administration, and then went into corporate marketing and loved that. Then I started working on my MBA, and that emphasis was in marketing communications and consumer behavior, which is that psychological side of why do people do what they do, and what are they thinking, and how do the words that you use in communications affect what people are thinking and draw them closer or repel them. And so studying that in graduate school, then that opened up opportunities for me to teach communications at the university level, which I loved. And so moved from corporate to university teaching, and had a solid 4 or 5 year stint doing that. And then I ventured out on my own, similar to how you then ventured out on your own. And in time, helping small businesses with their communications, helping them to pull together a strategy. All of that led to referrals and connections. And then eventually somebody, I can't even remember which nonprofit came first, but somebody came to me and they needed help in the same way that a business would with their communications. And I was like, oh, I'd love to do that. So I started doing some nonprofit and some business. And then it just kept growing into the nonprofit realm. And I love nonprofit. I just love the heart of it. I love learning about what people are doing to make the world a better place. And it's just this great intersection of strategy and heart that just lights me up. And so I kept pursuing more and more of that work. And I loved bringing my experience to that nonprofit realm and then seeing the difference that it makes when there's an equipping of a team and they are ready to execute a plan. Very often nonprofits are needing that kind of support. They have great teams and excellent teams, but if they don't have that strategy component, then that really puts them at a disadvantage. And so you need to be able to come in and demonstrate how that works. And so it's kind of getting into that teaching mode. I just love it. I love going in and helping and teaching and coaching and helping them understand how to implement for the long haul.
Oh, I love that. And you know what I'm kind of thinking as you're talking, like my favorite part, or one of my favorite parts of, frankly, all my clients, but a lot of the clients we've worked on together, gosh, the variety of the work. Like, you know, I think sometimes I'll be like, oh, hey, I might have somebody who needs you. And it's like, what do they do? I mean, it is so, we always get to learn, you know, and
I love that.
I just, like, it's like, tell me something. It's like so sciencey and technical on one hand. And then like, wait, what are you doing overseas? Like, it's really one of my favorite things to say, like, now teach me, you know, what's going on.
To hear how people are taking their passions and skills into the world, I feel like I'm always learning, like, oh, there's a nonprofit for that. I didn't know. And so to be able to learn from them the nuances of their mission, and then to be able to bring in my part, which is just the communication side of it, I love pairing that together and just learning about all the different ways that people are trying to help other people and help their communities.
It's so good. So good. Okay. So let's cut to the chase on, like, I guess I'll say like the problem you solve, right? Because I have a lot of people say to me like, hey, do you have a writer? And I'm always like, oh, you wait. Cause she's not a writer. She's a, So, I guess I'll say like, why do people reach out to you? Is that kind of a weird question? But like, what's the problem people are trying to solve, or what do these situations look like? So if someone's listening and saying, "Oh my gosh, I actually have that problem," like, why are they reaching out in the first place?
Well, I feel like they reach out initially because they say, "Oh, I need a writer," but how my work usually unfolds, it's much more of a they have a gap in staffing. Maybe a development director has left and they need to fill that role, but then they need someone to set up, what are we doing in the meantime? And so then I can come in kind of like a fractional person, where I can come in and I can make sure that communications department and system keeps going, and then improve upon what they've already built. So there are lots of things that can trigger that need. There can be growth. There could be a shift in a model. And then they realize, ooh, I don't know how to say what we're doing anymore because things have changed. There are nonprofits that have a solid mission, but then it's so hard for them to come up with a summary of what is it that we're doing, that it just gets all jumbled in the communications to the donor. So then they're realizing, oh, our communications aren't working. So there are lots of reasons why people may come to me, but very often it's triggered by an an urgency. Usually it's like, oh no, we need this project done and there's no way that our team can take it on. And so maybe they'll ask me to do a year-end campaign, or maybe they'll ask me to do an annual report. But once I get in there, if that's something that works out, then I'm always saying, hey, we got to back this train up and look at, how did you get here? What are the pieces in your communication strategy that are weak that then perpetuate this problem? So I always see it as sort of like the fire drill, or circus, or whatever you want to call it, any word where there's some chaos going on inside. And no one likes to live there, but it's so hard to stop it once it's happening.
Yeah.
And so very often I feel like I can come in as the outsider and say, okay, here's what you're doing well. And then if you add this on top of it, it's going to make everything run smoother in-house. And then that's going to affect how the donors are being connected back to you and to your mission. So yeah, it always starts with some sort of urgent crisis, but then I'm always like, hey, let's back it up and get the
right.
picture.
Yeah, that's usually, I feel like a lot of times what I hear, or the situation that, where I'm like, Erin, I'm going to send you somebody, is because oftentimes I find that it's like, well, we'll just have the development director do the writing too. Or can't that new events person also do all the writing? They might be a great writer, like great if they are, but it's almost, if anybody follows me on LinkedIn, I talk about this, but if they're really two different skill sets, and they might be a great writer, but do they have time to put in to the process and the strategy and the segmentation? That's a full-time job. And so I oftentimes find that sometimes the development team is just not, they're not able or not equipped to be the most efficient, because they are expected to also just do the writing, just do the appeal, just do the campaign, pull together the annual report. When, if those hours are off their plate, they could be raising more money. And so I find that, or I guess my question is like, are you coming alongside a lot of exhausted development directors who you're like, I thought I could do this, but gosh, this is, I'm locked behind my desk doing emails all day long.
Right. And that's not the best use of their time at all. I think the other thing is, like you said, there are good writers, but then understanding how communications can be used most effectively. I feel like that's the problem that I solve the most when I help with different teams, is that they may have a great writer on staff, but it's thinking through, how does this piece, whatever you're working on, contribute to the end goal, and shaping that message to fit into the whole, rather than, oh, I just need to send an email.
Yeah.
And so sending an email, I think of it as more like it's on the list, like, oh, this month we need to send the email. Check, we sent it. Instead of seeing it as, oh, this is part of the whole plan. And it's from A to Z throughout the whole year. And this is just the one piece, but it has to fit into the whole plan, and moving the donors through their experience with you, understanding how all that fits together like a puzzle. That is something that I love to do. I love to help with the overarching, are we helping donors to understand and to connect with you? And even within a particular piece, like I think of, it's annual report season, so everyone's talking annual reports, and what goes into the annual report and why. And there are lots of things you can say. There are a lot of pages you could fill, but which things go in there and which things really belong somewhere else? What's the purpose of that annual report, and is it going to deliver effectively? So helping teams to understand that flow throughout the year, but then also within the piece itself, and how it all ties back to effective communications.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like, of course, if people reach out, want an annual report, want a something, like you may do some one-off work or some strategic work, but, you're kind of saying like your ideal client is really somebody who wants to go next level in strategic communications, wants to further segment, wants to, I guess, have it be a bigger part of their overall growth strategy. Is that what I'm like hearing?
Yeah, definitely. I I have done standalone work for years. I mean, as a early on in my freelance work, I was just taking projects, and it felt much more like I'm going to do a little standalone piece and then move on, and hopefully they'll call again next year or something like that.
Yeah.
But over time, um, there was a dissatisfaction for me because I felt like, oh, it's the same problem all the time. And it felt like I wasn't solving the real problem. I felt like it was just a Band-Aid. And so then I realized, oh, I know how to fix it. It's just that it's a much bigger problem than just today we need a social media campaign or whatever. And so I realized that to serve my clients the best, it is that bigger scope of we need to look at all of your planning and all of your strategy and all of your communications. And that's a much bigger problem, or it's a much bigger need, I guess.
Yeah. Or opportunity,
Opportunity. It's just a much bigger can to open than just, oh, we just need this one thing done.
Yeah.
And that's what I love to do. I love to look at the whole picture, break it down. Let's talk through, what are you saying? How are you saying it? When are you saying it? Who are you saying it to? I love that whole thing.
Yeah.
And so my ideal client, who I love to work with, is someone who's saying, yes, we need these pieces done, but we want them done in a way that is effective. And then how does that fit into the whole? How would our team go about doing this over the course of a year? I love to help them develop that game plan, the pieces that go together that then will help them to have solid communications, steady communications, and to eliminate some of that chaos that really just comes with communications, because there's always a deadline at some point, and you've got to get it done and get it out the door.
Yeah.
So
it's like if we're in a fire drill every single November and we lose our minds, shouldn't we push pause and put something in place to not have a fire drill? I know, easier said than done.
I know it really is, but I love to help with that because I've been there. Like I've also worked in setting up their comms department. It's like, oh, I know the burden of it. It's like, oh, here we go. Once November hits, it's like we've got a lot going on in November, December, and then into January. So good.
So, obviously we're hoping that the communication converts, right? That it's helping organizations make more money. I think that's probably at the root of why people call both of us. I think this is why you and I also speak the same language, because we're always looking to see, where are the donors getting stuck? Are we talking in a way that's actually blocking them from giving their best gift? Or, do we need to look in the mirror and say, are we doing things actually that might be preventing donors from giving again, or growing in, just engagement with us? I'd love to actually spend the rest of our time talking through your approach and these kind of 5 core messaging components that I'd love to talk through how you see those play out, just what those are. If every organization had these 5 things, they'd be rocking it. So I'd love to start where I have the list here you gave me, with my favorite one first, which is a case for support. Yes. And it's interesting. I always will ask people, even when I talk to them, sometimes on a first meeting, I was like, hey, do you have a case for support? It's always kind of baffling to me, or like, maybe you've helped kind of frame up what a case for support is in my mind, but I get answers all over the board. It's, well, I don't know, we'd have to see samples, or we have a messaging guideline, or sometimes what's sent to me is more of a campaign brief. And I kind of find people don't really know what a case for support is. Talk me through this. What is a case for support in your world? Why do we need it? Hit me with that.
Sure. Well, the confusion is real because because everyone uses terms interchangeably, and so yes, anything like a messaging brief or a messaging guide or whatever, a campaign brief, I feel like all of those things serve a similar purpose, but for the organization as a whole, you need a case for support that is this overarching messaging guide that everyone in the organization will draw from. And that case for support, it's the case that you build for donors to support you. So we shorten that to case for support. But this is really what we're saying is, well, why in the world should donors come and give us money? Why should they partner with us? Why should they join us on this mission? And so you write this narrative, and really I always say it's a like 6 to 10 page document of a narrative. Like you can just read it like a little story, and it has 4 chapters. The first chapter is the crisis. So you would outline what is the problem that our organization is trying to solve in the world. And so this section is full of research and stats and showing that there really is a dire need for your organization to address. So you're outlining that crisis or problem. Then you talk through, well, how will your organization solve that problem? So you talk through, yes, there's a problem, but we have a really good solution. Let us tell you about the solution. So you talk about that. Then you say, we've got the solution, but part of that solution is the opportunity that donors have to partner with you, because really without donor support, that solution can't happen. You need the funding. So it's adding the opportunity for the donors to come into the solution, be part of that solution, and then together with your partners and donors, you produce these outcomes, which would be what happens when that crisis is solved. There's going to be some outcome. The world is a bright, shiny place. And so you want to cast that vision for what will the world be once the crisis is solved. So that narrative is just a base messaging guide that really stands strong and steady. I recommend that nonprofits review it every year, because you may tweak some things or add some things or find new phrases that you want to incorporate as like your standard for the organization. But typically, you mentioned a campaign brief. A campaign brief should echo that case, but the campaign brief is, what are we doing in this particular campaign to try to build donor support? So I almost see the campaign brief as a subset of the case. And that campaign brief is going to change with every campaign or every event. Like I know there are events that you would write out a messaging brief for. So that's how I see the difference. Like they're both needed, but they have very different purposes.
Yeah. And I think the other thing that you've helped me see, and I guess help me see, but then I see how it plays out in my clients' lives, is that this is not write it and put it in a graphic format and give it to donors. That's a brochure. This is an internal document that really almost acts as a filter. Like you got to write a social media post, it goes through the case. You have to write an annual report, it goes through the case. And I think when we say, oh, let's make it look pretty and give it to donors, like it's actually not the intended purpose, if I'm saying that right. I liked one time you described it as like, it's our guidepost.
Yes.
Like it's everything coming back to that, is everything filtering through that for consistency, whether we're sending a volunteer email or whatever type of audience we're talking to.
I like it as like a home base. Like you can start here. Every email, it's like, oh, we've got to talk about the problem today. Ooh, where do I start? How about open up that case, go to the crisis, and look at all of the messaging that's already crafted and ready to go. And it's like, oh, this section of the case, I could use that to build this email, and then just pull that right over and fill out the rest of that email right around it. And that way everything is echoing the case. You aren't starting with a blank page. I know so many writers. I mean, I'm a writer and I love writing, but it's hard when you're staring
Yeah.
down a page and you're on a deadline. So
Right.
having the messaging crafted and ready that you can pull from and then shape the rest of your messaging out of, it really is a time saver, and it's just more effective because everything has already been thought through from all the angles. Everyone in your organization, you're thinking about it from what is connecting with the donors. Why is it that they would want to be on mission with you?
Yeah.
That really helps you to sync up those messages and make them more effective.
I love that. Okay. And you do all these fancy like case trainings and everything, so everybody knows how to use it, which I think is always so amazing.
I love doing that.
Okay, number two, the next 4 are shorter. Programs and models. So I always say to my clients, a donor, and I'm probably thinking a little bit more at the top of the pyramid, but maybe every donor profile, they're never going to give their best gift if they don't understand 3 things: your plans. What are we doing this year? What are we doing next year? What are we doing in 5 years? Your programs, what you actually even do, and your need. And so your second one is programs and models. And so talk to me about reframing programs and models and talk to me about your approach of really making sure a donor understands what the organization does.
Yes, I think that this one, it seems like it would be simple. Like every organization is doing something, right? They're busy,
Right.
and they've got things going on. But the one thing I see is that so many nonprofits, they get stuck in the weeds with their programming and their descriptions, and they talk about almost like their day-to-day checklist or to-do list.
Ongoings.
Yes, and those things happen. I mean, we all have work at our desks and we're busy all day long. But programming is that overarching what's encapsulating this work. And there are lots of activities and they could change every day. They may change year to year, but that program, shaping it as something a bit bigger and a bigger bucket, I guess, where the activities fit under that description, it helps donors to understand, oh, yes, I want to come and help you solve the crisis through this particular initiative or program or approach.
So good. So good.
I like doing that.
Yeah, we've got some meaty ones going on right now in that area, which we're loving. Okay, number 3. So we're going through our core messaging, 5 components. Case for support, number 1. Programs and models, number 2. Number 3, maybe one of my favorite ones. Impact, stats, and stories. I love this because this is, in my world, donor retention. In my number 1 rule in thanking, showing impact is exceed expectations. We want to knock their socks off so that they give again and they give a larger gift. Talk to me about impact, stats, and stories, and how, we obviously we know storytelling is super important. How does this fit into your toolbox here?
I think one of the biggest things is coming up with the metrics. What are we trying to measure with those programs? And getting creative in that too, saying it's not just numbers, but is there a way to measure something that is maybe heart related or something that isn't as tangible? Is there a way to make it tangible? But having those stats in place so that you can say, hey, donors, you've partnered with us, and now look at the change that has happened because of that gift, and pairing that up with a particular person whose life has been changed or something that's happened in the community that now there's something else that is happening because the donors have given. So I really feel like that's important. The stats are like the quick, oh, I see what I did. But the story is bringing the human element to it and reminding everyone we're all in this as a community. It's not somebody way over there. It's like, oh, this is a person in our lives, in our community, and together we are making our community a better place to live and be.
Yeah. And I also feel like this is where, I want the story of change lives, all the things, all the photos, of course. But sometimes to that CFO who's like, show me the numbers, that story might be more of a organizational story of growth or innovation or opportunities that might exist that are a little bit more of that kind of CEO to CEO reporting feeling that oftentimes I feel like people miss, or it's like, well, that was in the annual report.
Right.
And so I think that's a critical part of the storytelling too. Like, what is the financial story of your organization? Because oftentimes I think that we think donors don't want to know that, or I don't think they're really interested in that, but they are. Like, that's when I feel like a lot of people of our top 30, top 50 donors, that's providing clarity on what their gift is achieving.
Yeah.
I think it's a critical part of the storytelling.
I think so too.
Okay, number 4, segments. Like,
Love
I'm going to have
segments.
a tone, like a ha tone behind me. This is my love language. Okay, so talk us through donor segmentation, how you lay segmentation on top of these core pieces, kind of what you typically see and where you're leading people through this.
What I like to do is to have just like a one pager for each of the segments that the organization has identified. The basic ones are top donors, mid donors, general donors. I mean, those are the basics, but then you could have other segments as well. You could have your volunteer segment, you could have your monthly donors, whatever. I mean, there are as many as the sun, where the sun shines. You could just have as many as you want, but usually you're going to have between 3 and 5 of these segments, and you're going to write up profiles for them. Who are they? Just try to give a general sense of who they are. And I like to come up with vocabulary that is specific to each of those segments so that when you are writing to them, there's just certain language that you use with each group, and it starts to shape how you can communicate with larger groups of people, but more specifically. And I love working on that because it helps you as the organization to understand, I want to communicate to this particular group. How do I take this general letter and tweak it so that it lands differently based on what that donor is wanting to hear and why they are partnering with you to begin with? So I start with those profiles, and then that will affect monthly communications. It will affect letters that go out. It helps you to understand how to use different communication vehicles, really clarifying who is it that is our audience for website. How about specific pages on the website? Who is our audience when we're posting things on social media? What you post there matters because you need to know which audience, which profile you really are gearing that message toward. So I'm helping donors to understand who the segments are, how you communicate with them, and then how to use the different communication vehicles in a way that will really click with the intended audience. And it just helps you to be more specific and focused in how you communicate.
And I find that this segmentation and not being one size fits all is really the first thing to go when the team is like,
oh my goodness,
we are doing 9 million things. You want me to send 3 versions of a newsletter? Right. That's crazy talk.
Yeah.
And so I feel like that, we started this conversation talking a little bit about development directors and like the load that sometimes they're carrying with, and do all the writing too. Like,
my goodness,
you can't do all this properly, or frame, give it the time that it really needs to be very thorough and thoughtful. It's the first thing to go, and frankly, I don't blame them.
Right.
It's like, get it out. It's the first of the month, and we have a newsletter.
No, but then realizing that with segmentation planned out, that actually will help to connect with donors in a way that makes the donors understand their role and their part in it, and then they respond. And so it can help you in the long run because you're getting a better relationship with your donors. Their donations are steady and consistent every year, and then that helps to fund your team. So then maybe you have enough hands on deck. It's just like, which comes first, chicken or the egg? But I don't know. But definitely segmentation, it does affect how your donors relate to you and their understanding of their part in your mission.
Right. And, sometimes we say, we need help. I need a writer. Let's go get a volunteer.
Right.
They're a good writer. They have a blog. I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
I hope people are hearing this is a science. I mean, like, it is really interesting watching you, Erin, because this is not just like, oh, I got to be a good writer. This is really an opportunity to be super strategic with your communications and frankly, drive revenue in greater ways. And I just feel like this is an area where people sometimes are irrationally frugal when it should be a big investment for an organization. I made some really bold statement a couple of months ago, and I was like, I think every nonprofit should right now add multi-six figures to their bottom line for marketing communication. Like, it was kind of a gutsy statement. I know, but what I was saying was like, I feel like it's sometimes the first thing to go, or because it's like, yeah, but could we get the annual report out in time? But and that's important. I want you to get the annual report out in time, but these are like really strategic shifts and tools to help your whole organization get off the communication spin cycle.
Yes.
And gosh, like, now's the time to invest in it so that next year it is, we're not pulling our hair out, when it's fiscal year end and we're just like going nuts. I just see that so often. Okay, fifth, sorry. Branding guide. Okay, so talk me through this. This is not graphic standards. Like, tell me when you say branding guide, what do you mean
Yes. Well, it's graphics plus. Like,
okay.
I like an expanded version of that. So, with all communications, it's not just what you say, the words, it's how you say it, it's how you deliver it, it's how it's received. And so this is everything from what's our color palette, what's our preferred font choice, how will we use photos, what will be our layout and design for social media posts. I mean, all of that can go into this branding guide, but then it's also little snippets like, this is how we describe the organization. So you could have a 1 sentence, a 3 sentence, and then like a full paragraph version, so that anytime you need to tell someone what your organization is up to, you can just pull it and it's the same blurb every single time.
Yeah.
So it's just a guide. It's all in one, ready for anyone to use. I really like it to be sort of like the front lines piece that everyone has access to, especially graphic design team and anyone who's working on social or the visual components of your brand. All of that goes together because really the messaging is supporting that and the graphics are supporting the message. So those two things go together always.
So good. And somebody has to be the police of that.
Yes, somebody does.
I mean, I love that. I love that person.
I do too.
But there's got to be the person who's like, oh, gee, like, it's not on brand. Like, oh, it's got to get changed. Or it goes rogue so quick.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so these are your 5 core pieces you're pulling together for people. So like, I guess I'd ask you then, in a perfect scenario, when all of this does come together, like, how do people's lives change? Like, what is the result, when people actually take the time to really get these core tools or core messaging tools in place?
What I hear initially when, especially developing the case for support, because that's the first piece of this process, I have heard back from my clients that they let out cheers as they're reading their case for support, that they said they felt inspired and got a little teary-eyed because they were like, yes, this is what we do. Yeah. We just needed somebody else with a fresh perspective to say it. And so I think it affirms the work and it clarifies what do we need to say. There are a lot of things you're doing, but what do you actually need to say in your communications? So being able to know what to say and what's okay to say, we don't need to explain to them how we're, doing our everyday meetings or whatever.
Yeah. What's irrelevant?
It's like, we don't need to say that. So helping them to focus on, this is what we're actually saying. And then that affects the communication plan for the whole year. All the segmentation affects the communication plan for the whole year. So I think what it does is it gives clarity. It helps you know, oh, this is the road we're walking down. This is what we're doing. It helps you to know, oh, we don't need to say this in quarter one because we already have that on track for quarter three.
Yeah.
It just gives you a sense of clarity. So it's the message with the plan, because really all this core messaging feeds into the next part, which is, what are the specific things you're actually going to say? That's getting into your actual annual plan, the campaigns, creating the emails, creating the social posts. So all of this is before you actually start doing the day-to-day work. Right. And so often it's like, nonprofits will skip this part and they're like, but we need the social media posts. I'm like, you don't have any of this other stuff in place. So how are you writing social media that is actually effective? And so that's what I've seen, is it helps a nonprofit create the messages that are effective and purposeful, and know which things you can say. We can't do everything, so we're not doing that, because that's not where our donors are wanting to connect with us anyway. And so it does help you to cut back on some of that work, because you realize, oh, that's not necessary for us.
Right. And do you feel like people want to know, like, how much more money is this going to raise me, Erin?
Yeah.
I know you can point to successes, but like, I mean, maybe talk through a success or something.
Sure. Definitely. I have worked with clients. They're implementing the core messaging strategy components, and then it's filtering into, let's say, year-end campaign or a mini campaign. And I just was working with a client. We've been working on their messaging, and we used that messaging and approach and the segmentation for a month-long campaign. And they raised 2.5 times their goal for the month.
Amazing.
I was shocked. I really thought, wow, that's above and beyond what I would have even expected. And it was such a great celebration of
congratulations
working. And in 1 month, they totally blew their
killed it
out of the waters. It was just so exciting. So things like that. I love hearing stories like that. There have been similar things with a Giving Tuesday campaign or a year-end campaign. I think it's also a matter of, are those metrics in place? Because sometimes it's hard to measure if you haven't been keeping track. So sometimes I say, okay, well, from now on, you're going to keep track. But at least now it's like you're focused and you know the campaign pieces, and you're going to be able to compare it then to next year.
So good. Well, I know it's a busy season for you with calendar year end.
Yes.
Erin, where is the best place for people to find you if they hear this and they're like, oh my goodness, it's time for core messaging work.
Well,
where should they find you?
Yes, they can come and find me. I'm active on LinkedIn, and Erin Straza. If you type in Erin Straza nonprofit, it's going to come up everywhere on social or online. So anyone can find me there. I'd love to have you meet up with me on LinkedIn. Reach out to me, and we can set up a time to chat.
Have a meeting with the nicest person I know. Awesome. Well, I want to thank Erin. Thank you for hopping on today and having a conversation.
Thank you so much for the conversation. This has been fun.
Good. If you're listening and you enjoyed this, I'm going to be doing a lot more interviews here as we head into this next couple of quarters. So just be sure to like, share, subscribe, ring the bell to be notified when more interviews like this come out. If you are listening to this on audio podcasts, just leave a review if you wouldn't mind on Apple Podcasts. And I'll see you on the next one. Thanks.